Hi guys, welcome to another tutorial. I wanted to try out doing the weekly tutorial as a video tutorial. I'm not entirely sure how this video got so long, but I'm going to roll with it and maybe not do it for the rest of the month because of time issues. However, I will go back to video recording, or I will try video recording as a weekly tutorial once May/June have come and I have a bit more time. As you can see, I've created my base canvas and established a clipping layer mask toward it. Now with the hard shading brush, I'm going in with the background color that I've color picked out of the reference photo. And I'm just working my way from the background to the foreground for a minute. It doesn't really matter what color your actual background canvas is. As you can see, the black, it just kind of hides behind the rest. I will start with a sketch layer in a minute after I've established like the basic background colors, and then the new color for the background will really help because of course you can't see black on black. As you can see, I continued with the texture brush at the top and just kind of dab my way through, just creating a nice cohesive over or transition part. With the hard shading brush and the turquoise, I'm going to go over the edges that the texture brush created earlier, just to make sure that it kind of merges together and creates a bit of a smoother look. Next, I'm going in with my sketch layer, so I create a new clipping mask layer and then I choose any pencil brush. I usually use the hard details brush like here, or the grainy details brush, and with a slightly darker color than the background, I'm gonna go in and create the shape for the temple that is on the left. I usually start with like the mid-ground structures of the painting, because that allows me to kind of work around it and add background and foreground structures according to those. I'm not using a grid here or a drawing assist. Of course you could do that if you prefer, but I'm just freehanding this because this is supposed to be a rough sketch and I will just base my color blocks later on this, and then I will delete the sketch layer again. I am using the handy function in Procreate where you pull or you draw one line and then hold it. It will then extend into either a straight line or a shape that you've been drawing, which is really helpful for these blocks. And also using the selection tool and the moving tool, which I will be doing in a little bit, to adjust shapes and lines that aren't quite the way that you'd like them to be. For that, I go ahead and select the part that I want to move, and then the moving tool just kind of putting in the direction that you'd like. If you'd like me to create a bit more of a detailed guide on it, let me know. Once I finished my first sketch layer, I'm going to create another clipping mask sketch layer, and with the same brush in a slightly darker color, I'm going in and starting to pencil in the rough basics for the structure on the right side in the reference photo. For that, I'm starting with a very rough basic sketch of the stairs that lead up to the structure, and because I can't really see what I'm doing at the bottom, I'm going to smudge out the background color to extend to the very bottom. Again, I feel like my structure is a little bit wonky, so I'm going in with the selection tool, and then I'm going to choose the distortion at the bottom right and then distort the picture to fit a little bit better. Now that I know where my structure on the right side ends and begins, I'm going back to the other sketch layer and adding the steps and the rocks on the side that will kind of be the barrier or the line between that and the grass in the middle. Now I add a new clipping mask layer behind all the sketch layers for the very background structures, and with the same sketch pencil pen, the hard details brush, I'm going in and just sketching in the very basic background, which is a formation of rocks or temples that have crumbled together, I think, and I'm just going to keep the very basic shape of that in the background. Once I've completed that structure in the background, I'm going to create a new clipping layer mask at the very top above all the other sketch layers, and I'm going to sketch in the tree that is covering the left structure in the reference photo from the top and kind of extends into the middle of the painting. I'm not going to do exactly the same as the reference photo just because the reference photo is AI created, and as great as it looks, it doesn't make much sense the way that the tree structure has kind of been put into this photo. So even though my structure will probably also not make much sense, I'm going to adjust it a little bit, starting with the foreground that is the big tree, maybe part trunk or root that covers the left side of the left structure, and then after that I'll create the background. Because I want to show you the full process, I decided to keep in the clips where I merged together layers to clean up a little bit. Obviously with the canvas size, you're always going to have limited layers in Procreate, and because I want to create duplicates, I'm going to merge layers before I duplicate things later on. But because I'm leaving everything in, I think it'll be pretty self-explanatory from when you see it. For the next step, I'm adding a new layer, clipping mask layer, and then choosing one darker color from the structures on the left. I'm going in with my square hollow brush and just adding the base of the structure. I add all the rough bits with the big brush, and then I decrease the size and go a bit smaller, but at the end of the day I'm going in with the hard details brush to fill out all the little edges and cracks, and also I'm going in with the eraser and the hard details brush later and just taking bits away that I've over painted earlier. Once I completed the color block base for the left structure, I'm going to do the same on the right, but I'm going to use or create a new clipping layer mask for that one as well. The handy tool that I mentioned about creating one long line and then holding it down, and then it straightens itself out, can also be used for the eraser, which is where I frequently use it to make sure that the lines that I erase are straight, like here. Now I will create a new clipping mask layer and fill out the background for the tree that comes on from the top. Once I fill in the front bit, I'm going to create or fill in the back bit on a new layer below this one in a darker color so that I can see what I'm doing. Next, I erase the door frame from the structure on the left because it'll be easier for me to fill it when I have a layer below that later on to fill it in, instead of filling it in on the same layer that I'll fill in the rest of that structure. It just helps me not paint over the edges, I suppose. Now I create another new clipping mask layer in the background for the background structure, and choosing a darker turquoise blue and any soft shading brush. I've got an airbrush here right now, I think. I'm going to fill in the base of the background structure and then add a couple of different shadows to it. Because I've chosen quite dark colors to fill in all the structures, I'm going to set all my sketch layers to the multiply layer mode to make sure that even when I have decreased the opacity, I can still see them against the structure base. I won't be using them for too much longer, and I know this part has taken quite a while, filling in all the different structures and stuff, but once you've got your base, you can start filling each part of the base in bit by bit and start detailing. So I feel like this is kind of the most important step, even though it takes the longest. I also go ahead and merge a few things together, plus I put all of them into the same group. This will allow me to duplicate everything for the next slide piece of canvas, I guess, but for that the clipping layer masks always undo themselves, so I go in and redo all the clipping layer masks. I guess I'm kind of showing you how I usually create the weekly tutorial, because I do have those steps in the weekly tutorials usually. I know this is not that important, but I thought it might be nice to kind of see the process at the end. Plus, I originally didn't want to make a long tutorial, which a full painting would definitely have been probably twice the length of this one, maybe more. As usual, this tutorial's been filmed over several days and nights, so I apologize for the lighting difference. The first thing I'm doing here is just moving that lower half of the tree background to the back so that it is behind the actual structure on the left. Because I didn't turn the light on here, but also when I turn the light on now with this setting, the light and colors in my actual painting will be a little bit different. As you can see by the reference photo, they're brighter and lighter because the camera kind of just balances it all out. Therefore, they won't be the correct ones. To paint onto each of the structures without painting over them, I essentially demask them and I stop the clipping mask layer for all of them, and then create a new clipping mask for each of them. And as I did for this tree now, that's why I can just color it in without coloring anything else in. As per usual, to color in trees, I'm using the texture brush with a darker color to just give it some guidance, texture, and then I go from there. Next, I color in the structure on the left, so essentially I'm going to create a clipping layer mask above that structure, and then it's kind of part of that. On that new layer, I then go in with the hollow square brush and just start adding the rough shadow to everything. I am orientating myself by the reference picture colors, but generally I wouldn't recommend that because even here I noticed they were a little bit too different. The great thing is later on we'll be using overlay layers and add blending layer modes, so then we can correct color and light. Generally speaking, when I add shadow or I just generally render something in or out, then I orientate myself by the colors I already have there, color pick those, and then choose a slightly lighter in this case, or a slightly darker color for shadows to create appropriate colors to move on with. As you can see, I have set the opacity of the sketch layers pretty low so that what I'm coloring in is more visible than the actual sketch layer. And as you can see here, it's already coming to shape a little bit better now, 3D wise. Now that I've added the basic shadows, I'm going to merge the layers that I've had as clipping mask layers for this structure together, and then I will move on to the next structure. I also go ahead and make that structure layer a clipping mask layer again, just to make sure that I'm cleaning up the layers as I go in accordance to the canvas I've got in the background. Before I move on to the next structure, I'm actually going to color in the tree trunk root that comes over the structure on the left. I'm also using this texture brush here again from my pack, just adding the very rough texture as a guidance and kind of in like circular, half circular motions. I'm kind of adding some shape to it, and then using the grainy detail brush, I go in and start detailing with slightly darker, slightly lighter colors, kind of according to the reference photo. Now I'm going to move on to the right structure. First of all, I'm going to create a new clipping mask layer for the structure, but then I remembered I still wanted to add a bit of background structure to it that I'm picking now with the color picker. So for that, I'm choosing to create a layer beneath that one, and then going in with the hollow square brush, I'm just going to add that bit of wall in the background. After that, I move on, and the coloring you can see me do here now is on the new clipping mask layer above the actual structure layer. Again, I'm going in and starting with the shadows, just generally adding some basic shadows to give everything a bit of form, and then a bit of light, as you will see as I go. Again, I won't be narrating everything. I think as you watch the video you will see what I mean, but if you have any questions, do let me know. Once I've added the basic colors and shades to the structure on the right, I will go ahead and make that a clipping mask layer again, and then go into the background structure, the very background, which is quite dark now. And choosing the stucco brush from Procreate, I will go in with a slightly darker brush color than I already have in there, and just adding some general texture. I will also go ahead and just add some basic light reflections on the stones, and yeah, a bit more shadows. After I've done the very basics there, I see that I feel like the stairs I've got in the middle of the painting and the front aren't very visible, and I want to be able to take the sketch layer away soon, so I essentially unclipping masked the structure on the right again, and with grainy detail brush and on a new clipping mask layer on that layer, I go in and add some shaping to the outside of the actual stairs. Before I move on to the next overall step, I'm going to add a little bit more detailing to the actual buildings, and then I will be saving that progress as one canvas slide and then moving on to the next. Whenever I work on details in these paintings, I usually use the grainy detail brush because it's not fully committal, but it does give you a nice color and allows the background to come through. Once I've duplicated all the slides, then I can merge one half together. And then I'll also go ahead and just clean up the layers that I have existing in my new canvas slide now, which will also give me room for more slides. With the hard details brush, I'm going in now and just adding some more fine-tuning to the structure on the left. And with the brighter color, I'm going in and just adding some details to the structuring. The nice thing about the size is that because the canvas is so small, you can just add scribbles as details and it doesn't really matter. I feel like when you have a bigger canvas, you do have to think about the structures you're adding as details and the intricate design. Now choosing a mid-tone olive color, I'm going in with the same brush and just adding some light green plants, I guess, foliage in green. This is one of my favorite parts because it just enhances everything so much and brings so much life into the painting. I've deliberately left a lot of the detail off the structures, especially at the top, because I knew I was going to cover a lot of it with the foliage. For now, I mostly want to make sure that I start adding a lot of green here and there to kind of lay out where I want the green to be later. And then after, I'm going to add the darker colors at the top and make sure that they stick out more with lighter colors, etc. Again, I'm going to go ahead and just make sure my canvas is tidy with the different layers I have. I keep calling them slides, but I mean the layers. Also because there is a limited amount of layers that you can have, so it's always good to keep on top of it. I will speed the green detailing up a little bit just because it does take me quite a long time whenever we get to it. You know, I guess the nice thing about the videoing is that you can actually see what I'm doing and I don't necessarily need to explain every single step. I will slow down in a minute again for the actual steps that I'm going to be painting out a bit more. I really like to use the chalk brush from Procreate for these kind of parts where you have quite a broad surface. I'll also show you a nice trick that I've kind of been using for the last few paintings I've been doing, especially the latest painting I've completed. But generally the chalk brush is amazing for plants and foliage and also surfaces, so yeah. I also go ahead and add some more lighter detailing to the very far background, just to keep on top with the detailing level across the whole painting. After that, I'm going to go in and paint the door on the left structure. For that, I have created a new clipping layer mask behind the structure, and with the stucco brush from Procreate, I go in with a base color of brown that adds a nice texture to it. And then with the grainy detailing brush, I go over that with a darker one again. Because of the grainy detail, it will be nicely textured now. And then I'm adding like a very simple design to the doorway. And just give that a bit of like an illustrator like look with the pencil. It is also with the, I've also done this part with the grainy detail brush, which I do feel like is very nice. And then later with some lighter color, we will be giving this a bit more structure. Again, bit by bit, I'm adding some detailing across the painting and some more green as well in a minute. Now that I've kind of completed that part of the detailing, I'm going to start adding a bit of light to build upon what I've done so far. For that, I first create a layer, an overlay layer on top of everything else, and with the stucco brush from Procreate, I go in and add some orange detailing. Mind you, this is really strong, so I just be careful with how much pressure I put onto the brush generally. And don't be afraid to raise stuff. And later on, I haven't done this now, and also this lighting will show it as quite extreme, but later on I will lower the opacity of the slide. So if you start off with something that is a bit too strong, don't worry, we can always change it later on as well. As you can see, I'm adding some blue shadows, and then I tried some turquoise at the top. Now I'm adding a new add layer, and with a light turquoise color, I'm letting some light streak come in to the middle. Using the texture brush, I kind of smudge that light streak out a little bit, so it is a bit more intermittent instead of just one big block of light. And now with a smaller size of the hard shading brush, I'm going in with an orange, adding that to both the structures. And I will be adding some yellow as well to the painting to bring out that color vibrancy where the light is going to come through. I remember thinking in my head while I was painting this, don't worry, I know it looks awful, but we will get there, This is just a necessary intermission before we get to our final result. So yes, trust the process is definitely something to remember in this part. In the next step, I'm choosing the grainy detail brush, and I'm on a new layer. I start adding some really bright highlights. This is kind of me building up on the light base that we've created that is so strong. Again, the lighting does oversaturate the canvas I have in front of me right now, but it is really strong, so I do notice this in the next 5 minutes and lower the opacity of that overlay and add layers that I've added earlier. But for now, I'm just going to add a load of bright highlights that really emphasize the shapes of the structures. This will also help with the 3D effect and kind of bringing it forward and helping the rest to kind of go back into the background. These little squiggling motions will help me add a little bit of detail in between the lines that I've just drawn. By alternating the different textures and the lines, they just add to the detail, I guess. As the shapes move back into the shadows will remain pretty blue, so I'm going to add a bit of blue layering at the top. Next, I'm going to go into a bit more detail with my foliage, so I will be adding some shadows to the foliage on the right hand structure, just by adding some darker greens and also creating generally more foliage there. And we've now come to the part where I've realized the light is too strong, so now you can see me sliding back the opacity of the two layers, and this is what I'm going to be working with. The lighting will change again in a little bit to back to normal, so you'll see what I've decided to stick with. But the nice thing is that now that I've dialed back the light, all the highlights and details I've put on top of that still remain the same and actually make it stick out even more, which is really nice, I think. And then when I add the light back into the painting at the end, I think that always really enhances the atmosphere. But now I'm going to be adding a bit more foliage around the existing stuff, trying to get from the light to the darker parts of the foliage and creating that transition. As there's also quite an abrupt change in the reference photo between the green and the dark, where the light hits it and where the shadows take over again, I am, leaving the abrupt change by choice in my painting as well, although I'm not going to do this quite as dramatic as the reference photo. I will go ahead and tidy up the detailing on the structure on the left a bit by adding some darker boundaries and also making sure that the door will be sticking out more than it is now, just by redrawing the grid line I've put into the door / wall of the left hand structure, and yeah, just generally adding a bit more foliage as well. After adding a lot more foliage and structure through shadow to the building on the left, I will go ahead and just work on adding some more light coming in from the top. Unfortunately, I've lost a snippet of video here where I've added some light, turquoise light coming in from the top with the stucco brush, as you can see on the tree roots in the background. And I'm just going to add some more greenery through tapping in with the texture brush. As you can see, the greenery on the roof on the left is sticking out quite a bit, so I'm going to add a lot of lighter detailing to where the light is actually hitting, and I'll also add a lot of darker detailing to make sure that it doesn't look like a big clump at the top right hand side of the left structured building. Now, using the textured brush, I'm going in with a slightly darker color than the actual sky into the top. You can choose a new layer for this if you like, and then I'm just going to tap in some shapes in the background. This is kind of like a little sign of leaves in the very far background, and I'm going to exacerbate them through the grainy detail brush and just tapping the leaves individually in. Now I'm going to be adding an add layer with a slightly orange color and the hard shading brush. I'm going in and just adding some light to the front part of the structures, and then I will be adding a second add layer on which, with one of the industrial brushes from Procreate, I'll be adding some texture to the stairs, which I'll explain in a second. I'm choosing the Twisted Treat brush. I'm going to brush in a really large shape like that, and then using the distort button or option, I'm going to shape it to match the stairs. Then I will be erasing parts to let the shape of the stairs come through, and you have yourself a nice textured staircase. I'm going to repeat that process for the stair on the far bottom half of the painting with the same brush, and then I've textured the entire stairs. I'm going to erase parts, and yeah, then you've got it. I'm going to make sure to add some context to the light halves of the stairs by adding a lot of light foliage and green around it. I'll also be adding final highlights to everything for the last 10 minutes now. Once again, I want to make sure that my layers are all in order, and I'm going to merge a load of them to save this and move on to the final canvas slide. Really, if you are working on a smaller canvas, you can decide what you want to merge together and what you want to leave. Things that you aren't sure about, I would suggest to leave the way they are, but I saw no need actually to keep any of the layers, so I ended up just flattening the entire group and having a second just regular slide. Then I usually go ahead and just duplicate the slide I'm working on or the layer. Then you've got a backup version just in case, and on the top part I'm going to add my detailing, while on the other part I can just save that if I don't like what I'm doing. Here you're seeing me use the liquify tool from Procreate, with which you can just move objects and shapes into directions without distorting the actual painting brush strokes, so that they're still remaining of quality and very clear, which I find very helpful. Next, I'm going in and just adding some more definition and some more details to the top part of the tree. For this, I'm also using the detailed grainy detail brush. For the last 6 minutes kind of that are left of this recording, I'm going in and just adding details to everything, brighter details. I'm smudging out parts and this part especially has really been bugging me for a long time, so I smudged that out. I've been working on the trees at the top, just making sure to add highlights to the parts of the structures that will catch the light, and of course I will be adding light as well, although I'll explain that when we get to it. For now, I'm adding an overlay layer on top of everything, and with the hard shading brush or with any airbrush you can go in, I'm going in with an orange color and then just adding some warmth to the structures. I'm choosing a dark color to give the shadows particularly warmth in this case. The background was bugging me a little bit as well, so I went into the background and I just smudged out parts with the grainy details brush. Now on a new layer on the top with the texture brush from my pack, I'm going in and adding some really dark foliage. If you don't have the texture brush, I would recommend the old brush or turpentine from Procreate. With turpentine or the old brush, you'll have to use the eraser a little bit to get the shape that you want. I also went ahead and added some foliage with the texture brush around the bottom in dark, and then using the hard details brush, I'm going in and just adding loads of details. Next, I'm adding an add blending mode layer, and we'll be adding some more light. With the grainy detail brush, I'm adding some color, or light rather, to the stairs, highlights to the stairs, highlights to the grass, and everything. I feel like you can do that on an add layer in any color. Next, I'm also going to add light with one of the industrial brushes, again on an add layer, on the same one if you prefer, or on a new one. I'm going in and just adding it on a new one just in case. This brush will give it a really misty, foggy sort of look, which I really like. So I've added that to the structures where the light is supposed to hit. I feel like something that's important to remember when adding light is that the details below will all be semi-washed out. And to rectify that, I just add lots of lighter details on top of that, because the difference between the light details that I'm adding and the washed out details from before that are a lot darker will make all the difference to the clearness, I feel like. Now for the final details, we're going to be ending with this version in the tutorial that I filmed, and then there are a few changes I made afterwards that I didn't film, but they are very slight changes at all. And so here you can see the difference between the one that we've just done on the left, and then on the right is the different outcome, where I've simply added an add layer with a bit of turquoise and yellow and orange light. I've added an exclusion layer. You can see the opacity there is really low, and then I've also added an overlay layer just with a slight bit more orange. As you can see, there isn't a major difference, but I just thought I'd show you what I've done after all. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the painting tutorial, and I'll see you again soon.